My name is Serena Dye, and spiritually growing up, my mom was a Christian and my father was Hindu. He's from India. So I was in a split home. My dad did allow my mom to raise me as a Christian, and I was sent to Christian school. And I had two older half-brothers from my mom, and they also went to the same Christian school as me. I was the tender age of 15 years old when I found out that I was pregnant, and I was sneaking around with my high school sweetheart. I wasn't supposed to be dating, but I was so just lovesick and hungry for attention that I would do whatever it took to see him, and I didn't really care about anything else. What drew me to my child's father was attention and affection. He gave me hugs. He spent time with me that I was not getting at home from my own family, and I needed that so badly. Well, when my boyfriend found out that I was pregnant, he was actually very supportive of the pregnancy, and he wanted me to have the baby. I had a feeling that when my parents found out about my pregnancy that they were going to be really upset. So I was actually planning on hiding the pregnancy from them as long as possible. So I told my best friend, and we decided that we were going to keep it a secret, but her mom ended up finding out somehow, and her mom felt that it was her responsibility to go to my parents and share with them that I was pregnant. After my parents found out that I was pregnant, my life took a turn for the worst. I was a daddy's girl, and I saw him turn into a person that I didn't even know. He became very forceful and angry, and the abuse and the threats to have an abortion were so strong, it shocked me. I didn't even know how to respond or react to the threats. I wasn't as close with my mom as a teenager, but she was pretty supportive when she found out that I was pregnant at first. She said that we would raise the baby together because my dad was threatening to divorce her if I followed through with the pregnancy. So after a week of immense pressure and threats, and I just couldn't fight anymore, I gave in and decided to go along with my father's request, because at that point he was actually threatening to take his own life if I didn't follow through with the abortion. So I was taken to the nearest Planned Parenthood in Iowa City, and when my parents and I walked into the Planned Parenthood, I'll always remember the black and white checkered floor and the way that the seats were arranged in the waiting room. It was like walking through a maze of seats. It was almost like they were herding in cattle. It wasn't a very welcoming waiting room. It was very dark, very dingy. There were several other women there, and I sat down, and my parents checked me in, and I looked around, and I began to cry because I realized that all the women that were there to do the same thing that I was. And at first my cry was very soft, but then it progressively became a louder and a louder cry to the point where I was upsetting the women in the waiting room. And so my mom went up to the secretary, and I had to be taken back early. Once I got back to the first room with the abortion worker, she performed an ultrasound, and she didn't tell me what she was doing, but I just instinctively knew that she was doing an ultrasound. And I wasn't supposed to see the monitor, but when she was looking at it, I scooched up on the bed and was able to see what she was looking at. And it was on that monitor that I saw my baby, and I saw a fluttering heartbeat. And I looked at her and I said, "I can't do this. I can't have an abortion." And she said, "Wait, you don't want to have an abortion?" And I said, "No, my parents want this, not me." And then she tried to reason with me. She's like, "Well, you're very early." But I was 8 weeks along, and to me that was not early. And so I was taken back out to the waiting room, and my parents were forced to take me back home. The ride home was horrific. We had to cross a bridge, and I was almost certain that my dad was going to run the car off the bridge. And I was just thankful that we made it home safely. And the following week was worse than the first week of the threats, the pressure, and the emotional and physical and verbal abuse. So I was taken back up to Iowa City, but this time I was taken to a different abortion clinic. When we pulled up to the clinic, it looked more like a house than a medical facility, an old house. And I was taken into the facility, and the waiting room was even dingier than the first waiting room at Planned Parenthood. I wasn't given an ultrasound this time. Instead, I was taken back to a counselor who told me that at my stage in pregnancy that my baby was more like an alien than a baby. And that was supposed to console me that what I was doing was okay. And then shortly after that, I was taken back to the room where they performed the abortions, and I was strapped to a bed, and two workers each held one of my hands. The abortion doctor, he came into the room. He didn't look at me and he didn't speak to me. He simply performed the abortion and he left the room. I was shocked about that because up to that point, I still had a pediatrician. I was still a child myself, and I was always treated with the greatest of care by all of my doctors. And so this was something new to me, and it made me feel very, very ashamed of myself. After the abortion was done, I was devastated because I had heard when my baby was sucked out of my body into that vacuum machine. And I was taken back to a room to recover with several other women where I was given a couple crackers and some juice. And then I was escorted out the back door and taken home. The ride home was more peaceful than before, but no, my parents never did try to console me or comfort me after my abortion. I think everybody tried to just put it behind them and move forward with their lives. So I was left to deal with the pain and the shame and the hurt of my abortion all by myself. And those first few days after my abortion were very traumatic because I was bleeding blood clots that were larger than eggs, and I was feeling very weak and very emotional, and I would just sit on the floor in my room as I cramped and bled, and I would rock and I would just cry. And even though I didn't have a relationship with Jesus at this time, I believe that God did lead me in some healing because I picked up a sketch pad one of those first few days after my abortion, and I sketched what I saw on the ultrasound monitor. I sketched the picture of the little baby that I saw inside my womb, and I wrote the little baby a poem, and I said, "Mommy is so sorry." I don't remember all the words, but I do remember that it did bring me some sort of consolation and peace. So I found a relationship with Jesus when I was 21 years old. I became a young mom after my abortion. I had two little girls, and I did marry the father of the baby from my abortion. For being a young couple, we were very successful. We both had great jobs. We had a nice home, cars. We had beautiful kids. I thought I had everything that I wanted in life, yet I still had this deep hole inside my heart. And that deep hole led me into a depression that led me to Jesus because he was what I really needed. And he was pursuing me through different people and circumstances at my workplace, and just through a series of events, I ended up giving my whole heart to Jesus and encountering the Holy Spirit, having a supernatural encounter with the presence of God, and just falling head over heels in love with him. And it wasn't until I had all 5 of my children and had been a Christian now for 7 years that the Lord started to knock on the door of my heart about healing from the pain of my abortion. I didn't even know that I was still hurting from my abortion. I did struggle with anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts from time to time, even after becoming a believer in Jesus Christ and getting set free from other things. But the Lord brought an anointed woman into my life who was writing a book full of abortion stories, and God told her that I had one. And she approached me, and I wanted to run away from her because I'm like, I don't want to tell you that. But I ended up accepting her invitation, and it was as if Jesus himself gave me an invitation to just take his hand and go on this journey of healing. And so I would do these phone calls with her and tell her my abortion testimony. And that's how the Lord started to heal me, was simply by sharing with her. There was one time I was on the phone with her that I ended up in the fetal position on the carpet, just weeping as Jesus was healing me from all the pain, all the shame, all the guilt. On my 30th birthday, I woke up from a dream that I had that morning, and I heard the Lord say, I wanted to give you a birthday present. And the dream was I was standing in the clouds, and I saw 2 children coming toward me. And one of them was taller than me, and he looked like my second to oldest daughter, just a male version of her. And when he came toward me, he walked right up to me and gave me a hug. And I just felt his love. And we didn't talk. We didn't exchange any words at all. But I knew who he was. And I knew he was 15 years old. And it was my 30th birthday. And my abortion happened when I was 15. And that was the best birthday present I've ever gotten, because I know what he looks like. And I know he's in heaven. And the other little child, because there were 2 children, I believe was my other son that I lost due to a miscarriage in between my 3rd and 4th children. So when I was in Washington, D.C. in 2020, sharing my abortion story at a congressional hearing, a lady passed out baby shoes to everybody that was sharing their stories, and I got a pair of little boy shoes. And when I looked down at the shoes, I heard the Lord say, his name is Isaiah. And so that's what I call him. He's my Isaiah, and the Lord's always speaking to me out of the book of Isaiah. So he's fulfilling his purpose. When I get to meet my sons in heaven, I'm just going to hug them for a really, really long time. And I don't know if I'll have many words, but I know that they're going to feel the love that I have in my heart for them. And we're going to have an eternity to catch up on everything that happened here on earth and how their lives had purpose, even though they weren't here with me and our family. Usually when the new year rolls around in January is when I really, really start thinking about my children, because that's when I had my abortion, was in January. And it's always a hard time for me, even now, because I still grieve that they don't get to be here with us on this earth. And I always wonder what it would have been like to have them here with me and the children that I do have, and looking at the children that I have, the blessing that they all are, and what joy they've brought to me and my husband's life. I just know that their lives have purpose, even if they're not here on earth with us. If I could go back and talk to my 15-year-old self in the situation that I was in, having parents who were deceived by the enemy and having to be under their authority and not having any say in what was happening, I would forgive myself. I would release and forgive myself from thinking that I had any sort of control over the situation, because at that point I didn't. And I would release grace to myself. And I would forgive my parents. I would forgive them right away. I wouldn't hang on to the bitterness or the hurt or the shame or the unforgiveness that I did toward them all of those years, because now looking back, when I put myself in my parents' shoes, especially my dad being from a different culture and a different country and not knowing Jesus, he thought he was doing the right thing for his 15-year-old daughter, even though he wasn't. And I have been able to love and forgive my dad, and I just know that I was in a very vulnerable situation, and that even though things were out of my control, that God's grace and his presence were still evident in my life. The Lord walked me through forgiveness toward my mother and my father by having me put myself in their shoes. And he showed me their perspective. He showed me their torment. He took me back and showed me the demonic forces that were working against me through my dad. And by doing that, he helped me see that this was really a battle with the enemy and not with my dad, that the enemy just had an open door of opportunity through my dad. And that made it very much easier for me to see my dad even as a victim of the enemy's plots and ploys against my life. And I was able to forgive him and release him. For my mom, it was very similar. I saw the fear, the what ifs. I saw all the lies that the enemy was speaking to her, that she was going to end up on the street because my dad was forcing to divorce her if I had the abortion. I saw all the fear, and I know that fear can make us flip the script and make decisions that we never thought that we could make. And so not only was I able to put myself in my mom's shoes and ask for her forgiveness, but down the road I was able to ask my mom to forgive me for putting her through anything that caused her hurt or pain or shame, and that also broke something off of me and her at the same time when that happened. Whether someone you love very much forced you to have an abortion, or you chose to have an abortion, forgiveness is yours and healing is yours. And there's so much grace for you. There's so much hope for your life. God wants to give you a hope and a future. He wants to break off all the shame, all the hurt, all the pain, all the depression, and all the anxiety. Those things are not part of your identity. And so receive his love today. Receive his forgiveness today. Receive his grace and his mercy, because I just see Jesus with his hand out to you like this, just waiting for you to take his hand and let him lead you down that road of healing and forgiveness.